Okay, let's work some examples of finding the solutions to a quadratic equation using the quadratic formula. Now, in the previous video, we derived up the quadratic formula, so let's go ahead and write it out. So we have, x is equal to negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac. And I guess this is an appropriate time for me to tell a story. But first, let's look at a problem here. Let's say that we have 2x squared minus 5x plus 5 is equal to 0. So let's go ahead and identify our A, B, and C. Now remember, in the previous video, we wrote this in general. Okay, remember A cannot be equal to 0. So what is A, B, and C here in our problem? Well, A is equal to 2, B is equal to negative 5, and C is equal to 5. Okay? Yes, I made a girl cry one day. Something I haven't mentioned here, and that's up here, the discriminant of a quadratic equation. This up here, inside this radical, is known as the discriminant. And by just looking at the discriminant, we can tell whether, this is going to have two zeros that are not real. Okay, these are not real zeros here, I guess you could say. They're complex conjugates. If the discriminant is equal to 0, then there will be one real zero, really of multiplicity 2. If d is greater than 0, then there will be two distinct zeros. And of course, should be working examples of each one of these, hopefully. I know this problem here is going to be d is less than 0. Anyway, let's get to the story. So I was working in the math lab one day, and there were some students that were studying for their test that was in the next couple of days. And I sat down between these two girls that were sitting at a computer. There was a chair in between, an empty chair, and so I sat down, and the girl on the right-hand side needed help, and she was trying to find the solutions to a quadratic formula. So I looked at her and I said, well, this is not going to factor nicely, so we're going to probably have to use the quadratic formula. I wrote it out on a piece of paper and then looked at her and said, you're going to have to memorize this. She looked at me and started crying and said, I will never be able to memorize the quadratic formula, and started crying. Well, the girl to the left of me, she decided to give her 2 cents. Let's see, what's C? C is 5. She looked over at me with this grimace on her face and said, you are so mean. Anyway, I think I helped her for a minute or two and then got up. Okay, so A is 2. Let's plug that in right here. Now, this is where students, this is where they mess up right here. That's doing the intermediate algebra steps. So we have a negative times a negative. That's going to make that a positive. All right, plus or minus Now we're looking at that discriminant once again. Don't discriminate against the discriminant. Negative 5 squared. Okay. Notice I put this in parentheses. It's extremely important because this is negative 5 times negative 5, which is 25, minus, we have 4 times 2 is 8. 8 times 5 is 40. Now look at this. The discriminant, 25 minus 40, that's going to be a negative number. A negative number. So what did we say? That would be D is the discriminant. If it's less than 0, then there will be 2 zeros that are complex conjugates. In other words, they're not going to, your solutions aren't going to be real. They're going to be imaginary. Or they're going to be complex numbers, which we'll get to in the next section. But just follow my lead here. So this is going to be all over 2 times 2 is 4. Okay. All right, we're not done. X is equal to 5 plus or minus the square root of, now 25 minus 40, what do we got on that? What do we got on 25 minus 40? Does anybody know? Negative 15 over 4. Okay. X is equal to, we have a plus and a minus. That means we're going to have 2 solutions here, even though they're not real. You have 5 plus the square root of negative 15 over 4, and you have X is equal to 5 minus the square root of negative 15 over 4. Now, whoa. The square root of negative 15. I don't know. Have we talked about this? Probably not. I don't think we have. If I had x squared is equal to negative 1, what's the solution for x here? Well, there are no 2 real numbers that you can multiply together that gives you negative 1. No 2 real numbers that are the same, that is, that when multiplied together give you negative 1. But we do have a solution, and it's called I. I squared is our solution, is equal to negative 1. If we square root I, you're like, what is this I thing all about? Stuff's crazy. Okay, when you square root a square, the square just falls away, and we're going to be left with I is equal to, now if I square root the left, I got to square root the right. Okay. So I is equal to the square root of negative 1. So we didn't have a solution. The real number system didn't offer a solution to this equation. But we came up with one. We said, well, I is going to be our solution. Go figure. All right. So here we go. So x is equal to 5 plus. Now the square root of negative 15 can be rewritten as the square root of negative 1 times the square root of 15. So we can break this up. Now what did we say the square root of negative 1 was? All right, we said that the square root of negative 1 was I. Okay. Now I don't care how you write it. You can put the I on this side or on this side, but I just put it over here on the left. Okay. And it's all over 4. So as you can see over here, this can be rewritten as 5 minus I times the square root of 15, whoops, yes, over 4. Okay. There's something else that you might also see is Now, of course, we're not going to spend this much time on the other examples, but you might see it as bringing this out here like this. It could be written like this. Okay, you might see it like that. And of course, our other solution was 1/4 5 minus I. Okay, so those are your two solutions. What are they actually called? Well, I have them labeled up here. They're known as the complex conjugates. Okay, and there's a geometric picture that can actually be presented. We won't talk about that for a while. All right. Okay, so we're going to work lots of examples. We're not going to take this much time in the next video. We're going to whip through it real fast. All right. This is where you can come on over, check it out. See you there.